Imagine a person standing outside a locked gate in the rain, holding a key that almost fits. They turn it once, then twice, then again, each attempt scraping metal against metal until their hand aches. Behind the gate is the life they believe they were supposed to have, the person who should have chosen them, the job that should have accepted them, the opportunity that should have opened. So when the lock refuses, they collapse into the oldest human conclusion. They call it rejection. They do not notice the warning symbols carved into the gate. They do not notice the smell of smoke drifting from behind it. They do not notice that the lock is not malfunctioning, but protecting. Sometimes the door that will not open is not evidence that you were denied your future. It is evidence that your future was not behind that door. There is a belief buried so deeply inside the human experience that most people have never thought to question it. It arrived before language. It was encoded into your nervous system before you were old enough to understand what it was encoding. The belief is this: when something or someone refuses you, it means you were not enough. This belief has its roots in something real. In the earliest days of human life, exclusion was dangerous. To be turned away from the group, the fire, the table, the shelter, was to be exposed to the cold alone. So your nervous system learned to treat rejection as a survival threat. It learned to equate closed doors with death. And for tens of thousands of years, that equation made sense. But you are no longer living in that world. And the gates that close in front of you now are not sending you into the wilderness to die. They are sending you in a different direction. The problem is that your subconscious has not received the update. It still reads every locked door as an emergency, and every emergency demands an explanation. So it reaches for the closest one available. And the closest explanation is always you. You were not smart enough, not attractive enough, not prepared enough, not worthy of entry. The subconscious does not stop to consider whether the door itself was wrong. It does not consider whether the path behind the gate was a dead end disguised as a destination. It only knows that it was denied access, and it needs a reason that keeps the world feeling orderly. So it collapses the entire event onto your identity. This is the false architecture that most people live inside without ever examining it. They confuse a navigation signal for a verdict. They confuse a locked gate for a mirror. They stand in the rain, soaking and humiliated, not because the rejection told them who they were, but because they decided the rejection told them who they were. The gate did not whisper that you were inadequate. Your interpretation did. Consider what it would mean to separate those two things. Consider what would shift in your inner world if you could look at a locked gate and genuinely ask, not what is wrong with me, but what is wrong with this door. Not why am I not enough for this path, but what would this path have cost me that I cannot currently see? This is not positive thinking. This is a completely different reading system. It is literacy in the language of closed access. The deepest damage rejection causes is not the wound of the moment. The wound of the moment heals. The deepest damage is the false conclusion the wound produces. The false conclusion that this door, this specific gate, this particular lock was the only measure of your value. That if you could not open it, nothing else would ever open for you. That you are categorically sealed out of the life you desire. That conclusion is the real obstruction, not the rejection itself. The rejection is a single signal in a system full of signals. It is one closed valve in a network of pathways. But when you collapse your identity into that single signal, you stop reading the rest of the network. You sit down in front of a locked gate and refuse to turn around, because turning around would mean admitting that you were trying to enter the wrong place. Here is the metaphysical truth that this archive has held for those who were ready to receive it. Rejection is not a verdict, it is a lock, and a lock has a specific function. It does not exist to humiliate. It does not exist to announce your unworthiness. A lock exists to keep certain things in and certain things out. And sometimes, you are the thing being kept out for a reason that is not about your inadequacy, but about the nature of what is on the other side. The lock is not your enemy. The lock is a mechanism of the larger system. And the larger system is not indifferent to you. It is not cruelly denying you for sport. The system is organized. It runs on patterns of resonance and misalignment. It closes doors that would have led you somewhere you were not built for, and opens doors in the direction you are actually designed to walk. The problem is that you decided which door was supposed to open, and you decided before you knew everything you know now. This is where the false belief does its most insidious work. It tells you that your desire for the thing is proof that the thing was meant for you, that your longing is a contract, that your hope is a guarantee. And when the gate refuses the key, the belief has nowhere to go except inward, turning the blade of that broken contract back on the self. But longing is not a contract. Hope is not a guarantee. And wanting something with the full weight of your being does not mean that thing was correct for the version of you that was standing at the gate. The reframe this archive offers is not a comfort. It is not designed to make you feel better about the pain of being turned away. It is designed to change the lens through which you read the event. Because when you change the lens, you change what you see. And when you change what you see, you change what you do next. You stop pressing the key into the wrong lock. You stop performing your worth for a gatekeeper who was never going to let you in. And you begin to look, slowly and with new eyes, at the path behind you that you have not yet turned to see. This is what this codex will reveal. It will not tell you that rejection does not hurt. It will not offer you a list of affirmations to paste over the wound. What it will do is something far more permanent. It will change the architecture of how you read what happens when a door closes in front of you. And once that architecture changes, no locked gate will ever mean the same thing to you again. In the first section of this journey, you will learn the law beneath the event. There is a mechanism operating behind every rejection, every unanswered message, every failed interview, every cold silence where warmth should have been. This mechanism is not random. It is not cruel. It is a system of closed access that functions with precise intelligence, and most people move through their entire lives without ever learning to read it. You will read it here. After that, you will enter the diagnostic mirror. You will be shown how this pattern appears in your daily life, in the places where you are pushing against a door that has been sending you the same signal for months or even years. You will be shown what the resistance reveals about you, not as criticism, but as information. Because the way you respond to a locked gate tells you almost everything about what you believe about your own worth, and that belief is the actual thing that needs to change. Then comes the protocol. This archive does not deal only in philosophy, it deals in practice. You will be given a specific sequence, a method for processing rejection without collapsing into shame, without chasing the same locked gate again, and without hardening into the cynicism that destroys the ability to ever try again. The protocol is practical, it is memorable, and it will remain useful long after this recording ends. After the protocol, you will move into advanced application. You will see how this teaching applies not only to romantic rejection or professional failure, but to money, friendship, creative work, spiritual direction, and the larger question of how you navigate a life full of doors, most of which were never meant for you. You will see how rejection, properly read, becomes a compass rather than a wound. And at the end, this archive will return you to the image where you began. The gate, the rain, the key that almost fits. But you will see it differently by then. You will understand what the gate was doing. You will understand what you were being protected from. And more importantly, you will understand what you were being redirected toward. You have likely come to this recording because something was denied to you. Something you wanted with real hunger, real hope, real investment. A relationship, a position, a collaboration, a connection, a door you spent enormous energy trying to unlock. And when it closed, or when you discovered it had never truly been open to you, something inside you broke in the particular way that rejection breaks things. That break brought you here. And this archive does not believe in coincidence. It believes in alignment. It believes that a closed door in one part of your life creates enough silence for you to finally hear what has been trying to reach you from another direction. This recording is part of that redirection. It arrived because the gate closed. And what opens on the other side of this teaching is something the locked gate could not have given you. There is one more thing you need to know before this journey begins. Everything revealed in this archive is cumulative. The early sections prepare you for the later ones. The language builds on itself. If you find yourself pausing, returning, rewinding, this is not a sign that you are slow. It is a sign that something in what was said is landing somewhere deep enough to disturb a belief you have held for a long time. Let it be disturbed. The disturbance is the beginning of the correction. If this language feels familiar, if this way of reading reality resonates with something already alive inside you, subscribe to the third library. There are more codices waiting to be opened, more hidden mechanisms waiting to be revealed, more forgotten protocols that this archive was built to preserve and transmit. The library does not close, and it does not reject those who arrive ready to read. Behind every rejection, there is a law operating. It is not a law written in any legal document or institutional code. It is older than those. It is a structural law, a law of resonance and incompatibility, a law that governs which pathways remain accessible to which versions of a person at which points in their development. It is the law of closed access, and understanding it will change the way you process every denial you have ever received and every denial you will ever receive again. The law of closed access states this: every doorway in the architecture of your life is calibrated to a specific version of you. Not your highest potential version, not your future self, not the idealized identity you carry in your imagination. The door is calibrated to who you actually are at the moment of arrival. Your current beliefs, your current frequency, your current capacity, your current emotional signature. And when there is a mismatch between that signature and what the door was built to receive, the door does not open. This is not a punishment. It is not a judgment. It is a calibration. Think of a radio frequency. If you are tuned to a particular station, you receive the signal from that station clearly. If there is even a small deviation in the frequency, the signal becomes static. The station does not hate you. The station does not know you exist. The station simply transmits at a fixed frequency, and the receiver must match it. Rejection is that static. It is the sound of a frequency mismatch. Now, here is where the law becomes more profound. The mismatch does not always mean you are at a lower frequency than the door. Sometimes the door is at a lower frequency than you. Sometimes the gate is locked because what is behind it would diminish you, not elevate you. Sometimes the position was not advanced enough for the direction your life is actually moving. Sometimes the relationship was not built for the emotional intelligence you have developed. Sometimes the collaboration was not aligned with the creative intelligence you carry. The lock protects in both directions. The law of closed access has three functions. The first is timing. The second is protection. The third is redirection. Each of these functions operates simultaneously in every rejection event, though one will typically be the dominant force depending on where you are in your larger arc. The timing function operates like this. There are doors that will open for you, but only after a specific sequence of other events has occurred. Not because the universe is making you wait arbitrarily, but because the infrastructure behind that door requires something from you that you do not yet possess. A skill, a scar, a relationship, a lesson. The door is not refusing you permanently. The door is refusing the incomplete version of you that arrived too early. The rejection is a temporal signal. Come back when the sequence is complete. The protection function is the one most people resist accepting. It requires you to trust that the system can see something you cannot see. That behind the gate you were pressing against, there was a cost you were not informed about. A cost in time, in emotional health, in creative freedom, in relational stability, in spiritual clarity. The protection function closes doors not because you are insufficient, but because the contents of the room behind them would have extracted something from you that you could not afford to lose. The redirection function is perhaps the most active of the three. When a door closes, the system does not simply leave you in an empty corridor. It introduces pressure. Pressure that will eventually turn you in a new direction if you allow it to. Most people resist this pressure by increasing their effort against the closed door. They add force to a situation that has already been sealed, and the system, patient and indifferent to the noise, simply waits for exhaustion to do what wisdom could have done much sooner. Consider what it means to understand that rejection is a redirection signal. If you genuinely internalize that concept, not as a comforting idea, but as an operational truth, your behavior after every closed door would be completely different. Instead of pressing harder, you would pause. Instead of questioning your worth, you would examine the alignment. Instead of trying to convince the gatekeeper to change their mind, you would begin scanning the corridor for the door that was actually opened by the pressure of this one closing. The law of closed access does not operate on a human timescale. It does not respond to urgency or desperation or even sincerity of desire. It responds to alignment, and alignment is not something you force, it is something you cultivate. It is the slow work of becoming more precisely who you are meant to be, so that the doors that were always calibrated for you begin to recognize you when you arrive. This is why some people seem to pass through opportunities with ease, while others press against gates for years with no result. It is not that some people are luckier or more deserving. It is that some people are, by circumstance or by deliberate cultivation, walking in closer alignment with the doors that were built for them. They are not forcing entry. They are arriving at the right calibration, and the system responds accordingly. The law also operates through what might be called sequential access. Certain doors will not open until a previous door has been walked through. Not the door you wanted to walk through, but a different one, a smaller one, a less glamorous one that felt like a consolation or a detour. The system is building a path, but the path is not straight, and from inside the path, you cannot see its shape. You can only see the door in front of you and the one that just closed behind you. When you stand at a gate that will not open, you are inside a sequence. You are at a specific point in a path whose full shape is invisible to you from your current position. The rejection is not a dead end. It is a node, a junction point in the larger architecture. And at junction points, something is always required of you, not effort at the closed door. Something else, stillness or discernment, or a willingness to look in a direction you have been avoiding. The most precise way to describe the law of closed access is this. Reality is a feedback system. It is not a passive stage upon which your life is performed. It is an active, responsive architecture that generates signals based on the intersection of your current state and the structural logic of what you are moving toward. Rejection is one of the clearest signals in that system. It is not background noise. It is a direct transmission. Most people treat it as background noise. They treat it as an unfortunate interruption to the life they were planning, something to be overcome as quickly as possible and replaced with success so that the pain of the signal can be muted. But muting a signal does not remove the condition the signal was describing. It only removes your awareness of the condition. And a condition you are unaware of is a condition you cannot correct. The law of closed access asks you to receive the signal, to sit with it, not to wallow in it or to manufacture suffering from it, but to genuinely receive it as information. To hold the rejection in your attention long enough to ask what it is telling you, not what it is telling you about your worth. That reading is almost never accurate, but what it is telling you about the alignment, the timing, the cost, and the direction. There is a difference between a door that was never meant for you and a door that will eventually open when the sequence is complete. The law of closed access presents both, and discernment is what separates them. But discernment requires a state of inner stillness that is impossible to access when you are pressing your full emotional weight against a locked gate. The stillness comes only when you step back, only when you release the key, only when you allow the feedback to land without immediately defending against it. The law is also, and this is important, protective of the people on the other side of the gate. A relationship that was not the right timing for you was also not the right timing for the other person. A position that was calibrated for someone with a different skill set would have placed you in an environment where you could not thrive. The system is not protecting only you. It is maintaining the coherence of a larger pattern that includes all the people and pathways connected to the doors you were pressing against. This does not mean you should feel grateful in the immediate aftermath of rejection. Gratitude forced before understanding is hollow. What this means is that there is an intelligence operating in the system that considers more factors than you can see from your current position. And that intelligence is not arbitrary. It is organized by a logic of alignment, resonance, and consequence that runs much deeper than the preferences and urgencies you brought to the gate. The law of closed access has one more dimension that most teachings leave unexplored. It is this: the closed door changes you, not in the superficial way people mean when they say that everything happens for a reason, but in a precise and structural way. The experience of being denied access to something you deeply wanted creates a pressure in the psyche that, if not discharged through shame or bitterness, becomes a creative force. It becomes a restlessness, a new hunger, a slight but permanent shift in direction that eventually places you in front of a completely different door, one that the old, unrejected version of you would never have found. Rejection, properly metabolized, is a form of redirection that could not have occurred any other way. The closed gate is not only a message about where you should not go. It is the event that sets in motion the movement toward where you should. And that movement, slow and often invisible at first, is the actual mechanism of your life advancing in the direction it was always designed to advance. This is the law. It is not kind or unkind. It is not personal. It is operational. It runs on alignment. It closes what is wrong. It opens what is ready. And it asks of you only one thing in return: that you learn to read it. Now that the law has been named, the deeper question becomes available. If the law is real, and if rejection is a legitimate signal within a living feedback system, then why do so many people consistently misread it? Why does the same signal, carrying the same intelligence, produce shame in one person and curiosity in another, bitterness in one and redirection in another, collapse in one and recalibration in another? The answer is not intelligence. It is not spiritual advancement. The answer is identity, and that is where this archive takes you next. The single most common reason that rejection is misread as failure rather than navigation is something this archive calls identity fusion. Identity fusion is what happens when you fuse your sense of self so completely to a desired outcome that the refusal of the outcome becomes indistinguishable from the refusal of the self. When the door closes, you do not experience the closing of a door. You experience the closing of yourself. This is not a character flaw. It is a product of how the subconscious mind processes attachment. When you want something badly enough, when you invest enough time and hope and emotional energy into a particular path, the subconscious begins to index your identity against that path. It begins to say, "This is who I am in relation to this goal, this relationship, this opportunity." And when the goal is denied, the subconscious receives that denial as a structural threat to the self, not just a change in circumstance. Identity fusion explains why people who receive a rejection for one specific thing immediately begin to feel as if everything about them is being rejected. The mind cannot separate the refusal of the application from the refusal of the applicant. It cannot separate the ending of the relationship from the negation of the relational self. It fuses all of these together into a single verdict, and that verdict reads, "You are not good enough, not for this, not for anything like this, perhaps not for anything at all." Once that verdict is installed in the subconscious, it changes the entire reading apparatus. The person no longer approaches the next door with curiosity. They approach it with the armored caution of someone who has already been told at the deepest level that they do not belong inside, and that posture, that inner armoring, creates an energy signature that the system picks up on. The doors begin to close more frequently, not because the person is less worthy, but because the belief in unworthiness is now part of the frequency being transmitted. The second major force that distorts the reading of rejection is shame. Shame is different from guilt. Guilt says I did something wrong. Shame says I am something wrong. And rejection is one of the most efficient triggers of shame available in human experience because it involves another person or a system of other people making a visible decision about whether or not to include you. Shame takes the closed door and turns it into a public announcement. Even when the rejection was private, even when no one else knew about the application or the message or the conversation, shame makes the person feel as if the entire world witnessed the closing and drew its conclusions. The sensation is exposure. The sensation is that your inadequacy has been seen and confirmed by external reality. And shame, unlike sadness, does not move through the body cleanly. It loops, it replays, it collects evidence for its own case. This is why people who have been rejected from something will often spend days or weeks reconstructing the sequence of events, looking for the moment where they failed, trying to identify the specific quality they lacked that would have made the door open. They are not processing, they are prosecuting. And the verdict has been decided before the trial begins, because shame always rules against you. The third force that distorts the reading is comparison. Comparison enters the experience of rejection and converts a private navigation event into a social ranking event. When you receive a rejection that someone else did not, the subconscious immediately begins to measure the distance between you and them. What do they have that you do not? What were they doing right that you were doing wrong? How did they unlock the gate that you could not open? Comparison removes you entirely from the logic of alignment and places you inside the logic of competition. And the logic of competition has a different metaphysical structure. In the logic of competition, there is a finite supply of doors, and someone else has taken the door that should have been yours. In the logic of alignment, no one can take the door that was calibrated for you. No one else carries your frequency. No one else arrives at your specific door at your specific moment of readiness. Comparison is a false map. It is reading someone else's navigation instructions as if they were your own. The fourth force is the one most rarely discussed. It is social validation as survival. Human beings do not only seek approval because it feels good. They seek it because it once meant safety. To be chosen by the group, to be selected, to have someone in authority look at you and say, yes, this person belongs, activated the same neurological reward pathways as physical safety. And rejection activated the same alarm systems as physical danger. This means that when a person is rejected from a job, a relationship, a creative community, or any other system of belonging, their nervous system does not neutrally receive that information. It catastrophizes. It reads the rejection as a survival emergency and floods the body with the chemical signature of threat. And when you are inside a threat response, your capacity for nuanced reading, for symbolic interpretation, for systemic thinking collapses. You cannot read the deeper intelligence of the closed door when your body is running a survival program. The program only has one question: how do I make this safe again? And the fastest answer is almost always, prove that you deserve entry. This is why people pursue closed doors with escalating desperation. They are not being irrational. They are following a neurological survival script that was written for a world where exclusion was lethal. The script says, if you have been denied access, demonstrate your worth to the gatekeeper. Show them you belong. Try harder. Do not stop. Because stopping means accepting exclusion, and exclusion means danger. And danger must be eliminated as quickly as possible. The script is ancient and powerful and completely wrong for navigating the metaphysical reality of a life full of doors. It turns every rejection into a performance, and every performance reinforces the belief that your access to the life you desire is conditional on the approval of the gatekeepers. And when you believe that, you give the gatekeepers an authority they were never supposed to have. You make them the arbiters of your future, and you make yourself a supplicant at every threshold you encounter. There is also a distortion that comes specifically from what this archive calls premature meaning-making. This happens when someone assigns a permanent interpretation to a temporary signal. When a rejection occurs, the mind is hungry for meaning. It will not tolerate the uncertainty of not knowing why, so it manufactures a reason, and the reason it manufactures is almost never the most accurate one. It is almost always the most emotionally immediate one, which is almost always the most painful one. The person did not respond to your message. The premature meaning is that you are not interesting enough. The interview did not lead to an offer. The premature meaning is that you are not skilled enough. The relationship ended before it began. The premature meaning is that you are not lovable enough. None of these conclusions have been examined against the actual mechanics of the event. They have simply been assembled from the raw material of pain and installed as truth before any real investigation has occurred. What would change if you trained yourself to hold the question open? What if, instead of assigning meaning in the first 24 hours after a rejection, you simply received the signal and allowed the interpretation to develop over time, in the same way that a photograph develops in the darkroom, requiring patience before the image becomes clear? The image is there. The intelligence behind the closed door is there, but it cannot be seen clearly in the first moments of pain. It requires the passage of time and the stillness of a mind that is no longer in survival mode. All of these forces, identity fusion, shame, comparison, the survival script, and premature meaning-making, combine to create a reading apparatus that is structurally biased toward the most painful interpretation of every closed door. And this is not a flaw of the individual. It is a feature of an unexamined subconscious operating without the tools of symbolic literacy. The goal of this archive is not to tell you that these forces do not exist. They do. The goal is to make you aware of them so that their automatic operation can be interrupted. Awareness does not eliminate the forces, but it creates a gap between the stimulus and the response, between the closing of the door and the conclusion you draw about what the closing means, and inside that gap is where the real reading can begin. Inside that gap is where you stop prosecuting yourself and start interpreting the signal. Inside that gap is where the law of closed access finally becomes readable. And inside that gap is where your life begins to make a different kind of sense. There is a woman who spends 4 months in regular conversation with someone she believes she loves. The messages go back and forth. There is warmth, laughter, what feels like genuine recognition. And then one day, the warmth stops. The responses become slow, then sparse, then absent. She sends one more message, then another, then one that she drafts and redrafts for an hour before sending. Silence. The door closes. Her first interpretation is the one the false belief always provides. She was not enough. Not beautiful enough, not interesting enough, not confident enough, not the right kind of person for the kind of person she thought he was. She reviews every conversation looking for the error. She finds several. She prosecutes each one. The verdict is always the same, and the verdict is a lie. What she cannot see from inside the pain is the pattern this person repeated with every person they engaged. The warmth was genuine. The withdrawal was also a pattern of emotional unavailability that had nothing to do with her quality and everything to do with the architecture of that person's interior world. The door was always going to close, not because she was insufficient, but because the door was built without a stable hinge. It could never stay open for anyone. 2 years later, she is in a relationship with someone who does not disappear, someone whose door is not only open but anchored. And looking back, she will sometimes say, almost without realizing what she is saying, that if that first door had not closed, she would not have been available when this one opened. The closed door was not a verdict. It was a vacancy notice, a signal that the space she was occupying needed to be freed for a different architecture. Now, consider a man who applies for a position he is prepared for over the course of 2 years. He has studied the field, developed the credentials, refined the approach. He submits the application with a confidence he has earned. The response comes weeks later in a single paragraph. They have moved in a different direction. He sits with the rejection for a long time. He does not press forward into the next application immediately. He sits, and in the sitting, something surfaces. A question he had been suppressing since the moment he began preparing for the position. A question about whether this was actually the work he wanted to do, or whether it was the work he had decided to pursue because someone he admired had told him it was the right direction for him. The rejection created enough silence for the suppressed question to become audible. And the question, once audible, changed everything. He eventually moves into a different field, one that was never part of the original plan. One that the 2 years of preparation had quietly been building him for without him knowing it. The skills transferred, the knowledge transferred, but the direction was entirely new, and the new direction was not a consolation prize, it was the actual path. The rejection had been trying to tell him something he was not ready to hear while he was still pressing toward the gate. These are not unusual stories. They are the most common stories in human experience. They are simply usually told in reverse. People tell them after the redirection has been confirmed. They tell them when there is enough distance to see that the closed door was a turning point. But almost no one tells the story while they're standing in the rain, key in hand, because in that moment the story is not yet legible. The archive is not yet complete. The full image has not yet developed. Consider a creative project that is declined by every avenue the creator attempts. A manuscript sent to dozens of publishers and returned from each one with a different variation of the same word, no. The creator stands at gate after gate, and gate after gate refuses the key. The conventional reading is that the work is not ready or not good enough or not the right market fit. And sometimes that reading is accurate, but sometimes the work is being declined because the wrong houses were being targeted, houses whose aesthetic was fundamentally incompatible with what the work was trying to do. And the rejections, each one painful, each one landing in the creative self like a small wound, are also data. They are pointing toward the absence of resonance. They are saying, this is not the right architecture for what you have built. Look for a different kind of house, a smaller press, a different format, a different audience. The cumulative signal of the rejections was not the message that the work had failed. It was the message that the work had been brought to the wrong doors. A loan application denied. The immediate reading is financial inadequacy, a verdict on the worthiness of the business idea, the person, the plan. But sometimes the denial comes because the infrastructure of the business was not yet ready for the size of the investment being requested. The loan would not have accelerated growth. It would have accelerated exposure to a scale the business could not yet manage. The denial was a structural protection against an expansion that would have outpaced the foundation. The founder, who had their loan denied and was forced to build more slowly, often finds several years later that the slower build created a more resilient structure, that the pressure of limited resources forced a precision in decision-making that the abundance of capital would have made unnecessary. The gate that was locked kept them small, long enough for the foundation to solidify, and the foundation is what everything else eventually rested on. A collaboration pitched, discussed with enthusiasm, and then quietly abandoned by the other party. The silence that follows a canceled collaboration is a particular kind of quiet. It carries a specific confusion because the enthusiasm seemed real. The possibility seemed genuine. The shared vision seemed to be building toward something. And then nothing. The withdrawal of engagement without clear explanation. What the silence often conceals is this: the other party recognized, perhaps unconsciously, a fundamental incompatibility in working style, creative philosophy, or vision direction that would have become catastrophic if the collaboration had proceeded. The enthusiasm was real, but it existed in the space before the practical details of alignment were examined. When the alignment failed on a practical level, the other party withdrew. And the withdrawal, painful as it was, prevented a collaboration that would have cost both parties time, money, creative energy, and possibly the relationship itself. There is also the unanswered message. The message sent into silence and never returned. Of all the forms of rejection, this one carries perhaps the most unresolved ambiguity, because the silence does not explain itself. The lock offers no inscription. The gate carries no notice. You are simply left holding the message you sent, and you fill the silence with your own narrative. But silence is also a signal. It is one of the clearest signals the system produces. It is the system saying, this connection did not have the resonance necessary to generate a response, not because your message was poorly written, not because your timing was wrong, not because of anything correctable, but because the fundamental frequency of connection between these two people did not produce the activation necessary for engagement. The silence is not about you. The silence is about the absence of resonance. This is perhaps the hardest teaching in this section to receive, because the unanswered message feels intensely personal. The person saw your name, they read what you wrote, and they chose not to respond. How can that not be personal? And the answer is, the decision may be personal, but the signal it produces is navigational. The signal is telling you that you were attempting to build a connection in the direction of someone who was not oriented toward you. And building in that direction would have required an increasing investment of self into a decreasing return. The romantic rejection after months of hope. The job offer that goes to someone else after multiple rounds of interviews. The mentor who does not write back. The creative agency that passes on the pitch. The community that forms without including you. Each of these events carries the same underlying signal, dressed in a different circumstance. Each one is the system communicating through the language of closed access that a specific alignment is absent. And each one, if received as information rather than verdict, becomes a precise navigational coordinate. The navigational coordinate does not always point to a specific alternative. Sometimes it simply points away. Sometimes the only information the rejection provides is that this was not it. And that information, that this was not it, is itself enormously valuable. It eliminates a variable. It removes a path that would have consumed resources that are now available for something else. Every closed door eliminates a direction, and every eliminated direction is a step closer to the direction that remains. Consider the lost opportunity that you mourned for years, the thing you were certain would have changed everything if only it had been given to you. Sit with it honestly, not with false positivity, not with the protective performance of gratitude, but with genuine examination. What would you have been doing for the years since that door closed if the door had opened? What would you have been building, experiencing, becoming? And how does that imagined life compare to the actual life you have been living and the actual person you have been becoming? This is not an exercise in proving that rejection is always good. Sometimes what was lost was genuinely valuable, and the loss was genuinely costly. The archive does not hide from that complexity. But the exercise is useful because it reveals the assumptions beneath the grief. The assumption that if the door had opened, everything would have been better. That the path behind the gate was the correct path. That the life on the other side was the life you were built for. Those assumptions are almost never examined. They are simply held as if they were self-evident. And in the holding, they keep the grief alive long after the signal has done its work and moved on to the next transmission. Here is the final example for this section, and it is perhaps the most instructive. There are people in your life who received almost every door they pressed against with ease. Relationships formed quickly. Opportunities arrived without resistance. Every gate seemed to have a key that fit. And some of those people, not all, but some, eventually found themselves very far down a path that felt increasingly like someone else's life. A life assembled from available doors rather than from genuine direction. A life that was efficient, but not aligned. Accessible, but not truthful. The doors that refuse you are sometimes doing you the service of preventing exactly this. They are preventing a life built from whatever was available rather than from what you were actually designed for. The locked gate is not evidence that nothing is available to you. It is evidence that this particular thing was not available for you, and that the distinction matters more than you currently know. The pattern of forced pursuit does not announce itself. It does not arrive wearing a sign that says you are pressing against a closed door. It arrives in the increments of a process that feels, in the early stages, almost identical to legitimate perseverance. This is what makes it difficult to diagnose from the inside. The line between determined pursuit and forced pursuit is not drawn by effort level. It is drawn by the quality of the signal being received and the awareness with which you are receiving it. The pattern begins with genuine desire. You see a door. You feel drawn to it with real conviction. There is nothing distorted in this beginning. The door may be a relationship, a career path, a creative project, a financial goal, a community you want to belong to. The desire is real. The orientation toward the door is honest. This is the starting point, and it is not the problem. The problem begins when the first signal of misalignment arrives and is overridden by the will. The door gives some form of resistance, a slow response, an underwhelming reception, a missing resonance, a closing that seems premature, an absence where presence was expected. And instead of receiving the signal as information, the will declares it an obstacle. something to be overcome, something to be dissolved through more effort, more persistence, more performance of worthiness. This override is the moment the pattern begins, because from this point forward, the energy being directed at the door shifts its quality. It is no longer the clean energy of genuine pursuit. It becomes the contracted energy of need. And need transmits a frequency that the system reads differently from desire. Desire says, I am moving toward this. Need says, I will not be okay without this. The system responds to each differently. As the override continues, the pattern develops its second phase. This is what the archive calls the humiliation loop. The humiliation loop occurs when the person continues to pursue despite repeated signals of closure, and each repeated denial adds another layer of shame to the attempt. The pursuit becomes less and less about the original desire, and more about erasing the shame of not having received what was requested. The goal shifts from the thing itself to the need to prove that the original desire was not a mistake. This is a crucial turn in the pattern, and it is almost always invisible from the inside. The person believes they are still pursuing the original desire. They are not. They are now pursuing the validation that would retroactively justify the desire and erase the shame of the repeated denial. They are trying to win a case, not open a door. And no amount of winning a case will open a door that was never calibrated for them. The humiliation loop has a distinctive emotional texture. It feels urgent, contracted, slightly desperate, and accompanied by a specific kind of mental activity that is obsessive in nature. The thoughts circle the closed door continuously. What did I do wrong? What can I do differently? What would they need to see in order to change their decision? The mind cannot leave the subject alone, and this inability to leave the subject alone is itself a signal within the pattern. It is the nervous system telling you that this situation has crossed from desire into compulsion. In the pattern of forced pursuit, there is also a characteristic contraction of peripheral vision. The person becomes increasingly unable to notice other doors, other signals, other pathways. The closed gate fills the entire perceptual field. Every conversation somehow circles back to it. Every quiet moment is occupied by it. The awareness narrows to a single point, and that single point is the lock that will not yield. This narrowing is not weakness, it is what identity fusion does to perception. When you have fused your sense of self to a particular outcome, your perceptual system reorganizes itself around that outcome. It filters for evidence related to the outcome and filters out everything else. The universe may be sending transmission after transmission about a completely different direction. But you cannot receive those transmissions because your antenna has been locked onto a frequency that is producing static. The pattern continues to develop through what might be called the effort escalation phase. In this phase, the person responds to each failed attempt not by stepping back and reassessing, but by increasing the intensity and variety of their efforts. They try a different approach. They seek advice on how to present themselves better. They study what worked for others. They modify their communication style, their appearance, their portfolio, their pitch. They rebuild the key again and again, hoping the new version will finally fit. There is nothing wrong with refinement and growth, but refinement and growth undertaken in order to win access to a specific closed door is a fundamentally different activity from refinement and growth undertaken in the direction of genuine alignment. The first is calibrated to someone else's requirements. The second is calibrated to your own nature. The first produces a performance. The second produces a becoming. And a performance, no matter how polished, will not open a door that was built for something authentic. At some point in the pattern, exhaustion arrives, and exhaustion, in this context, is not a failure, it is a mercy. Exhaustion is the body doing what wisdom could not convince the mind to do. Exhaustion says, "We cannot continue this. We do not have the fuel." The pressing must stop, not because we have decided to stop, but because the body has withdrawn the resource that was making the pressing possible. And here is what this archive has observed across every version of this pattern it has documented. The moment of surrender, whether chosen or forced by exhaustion, is almost always followed by a particular quality of silence. Not the silence of defeat. Something different, something that feels, even in the pain of it, like the first genuinely clean breath in a long time. The tension that had been held in the body around the pursuit begins to release. And in the release, something opens. Not the gate. Something else. A perception. A direction. A signal from a completely different part of the field that had been invisible while the full weight of attention was pressed against the wrong door. This quality of peace after surrender is one of the most consistent markers in the pattern. It appears in every version of the forced pursuit, regardless of what the pursuit was aimed at. And it is one of the clearest confirmations the system offers that the lock was real, that the resistance was protective, and that the surrender was not defeat. It was the beginning of the actual movement. After the surrender comes a phase that might be called the recalibration window. During this window, the person's perceptual field begins to reopen. The narrowing corrects. The peripheral vision returns. Signals that had been invisible while the attention was contracted around the closed door begin to become legible. A different opportunity appears on the edge of awareness. A connection that had been backgrounded moves into the foreground. A creative direction that had been suppressed by the urgency of the pursuit re-emerges with a clarity it could not have had while the pursuit was active. The recalibration window is not always immediately visible as such. Sometimes it looks like emptiness. Sometimes it looks like loss. Sometimes the person spends weeks in the quiet after surrender before any new signal becomes clear. But the window is opening. The system is working. And the fact that nothing new is immediately visible does not mean nothing new is approaching. It means the field is clearing. Before moving to the next layer of this teaching, there is something important to acknowledge directly. Not every desire met with resistance is a wrong door. Not every closed gate is protective. Perseverance is real. Legitimate obstacles are real. And there are doors that require sustained, patient effort before they open, because they are aligned but demanding. The pattern of forced pursuit can look like perseverance from the outside. Discernment is what separates them from the inside, and the archive will address that discernment directly in the sections ahead. If you have recognized yourself in this pattern, if you have seen your own experience in the humiliation loop, the effort escalation, the narrowing of perception, the exhaustion, and the strange peace that followed the surrender, write the word signal in the comments. Not as a performance of recognition, but as a notation in your own archive. A marker that says, I know this pattern, I have lived inside it, and now I am learning to read it. When a door closes and you find yourself pressing against it, you are not only in a navigation event, you are in a revelation event. Because the way you respond to a locked gate does not simply describe your circumstances, it describes you. It maps the interior architecture of your belief system with a precision that almost nothing else can match. This is not said to make you feel exposed, it is said to make you feel curious. Because what rejection reveals about you is not what you fear it reveals. It does not reveal inadequacy. It reveals attachment. It reveals the locations where your sense of self has become dependent on external confirmation. And those locations are not evidence of your weakness. They are the exact sites where your next growth is waiting. The first thing rejection reveals is the difference between want and need in your inner economy. When a person wants something and does not receive it, there is disappointment. Disappointment is clean. It moves through the emotional body like weather. It arrives, it has weight, it passes. But when a person needs something and does not receive it, the response is different in kind. It is not disappointment, it is disruption. The foundation shifts, the ground beneath the self becomes unstable, and that instability reveals that the thing was not only wanted, it was load-bearing. It was holding up something essential. What was it holding up? This is the question that rejection invites you to examine. The relationship you needed to be chosen by. What was it supposed to confirm about you? Your desirability, your worth as a companion, your ability to be loved by someone of a particular quality. The job you needed to receive, what was it supposed to establish? Your intelligence, your professional legitimacy, your right to take up space in a particular world, the opportunity you needed to open, what was it supposed to prove? That your years of effort were not wasted, that your direction was correct, that you had not been wrong about yourself all along. When you can name what the door was supposed to confirm, you have located the belief that was fused to the outcome, and that belief is the one that needs examining. Not because it is false necessarily, but because it has been placed in an external structure. It has been assigned to a gatekeeper, and any belief about your own value that requires a gatekeeper to confirm it is a belief that sits on an extremely unstable foundation. Rejection also reveals the relationship between the self and scarcity. Many people press against closed doors, not simply because they desire the specific thing behind the door, but because they believe there is a finite supply of what the door represents. If you are rejected from one love, there will not be another love as good. If you are denied one opportunity, there will not be another opportunity as aligned. If one collaboration fails, the creative possibilities have been permanently diminished. This is the scarcity frame. And the scarcity frame turns every closed door into a catastrophic loss rather than a redirection. The scarcity frame does not exist in reality. It exists in the belief system. It is a conclusion drawn from past experience, perhaps from a childhood in which resources were genuinely limited, in which love was conditional, in which opportunities were rare and competition was fierce. The subconscious carries that map forward into adulthood and applies it to a completely different terrain. But the map is not the territory. And the scarcity the subconscious is navigating is a memory, not a current fact. What rejection reveals in the presence of the scarcity frame is this: there is a belief operating in the deep architecture of the self that says access is rare, and that a missed access is an access permanently lost. The work of this revelation is not to argue with the belief directly. It is to allow the accumulation of evidence to slowly erode it. Every door that opens after a door that closed is a piece of evidence against the scarcity frame. Every redirection that leads somewhere genuinely valuable is a deposit into a different account. The account that says, access is not finite, only this particular door was closed. Rejection also reveals the depth of comparison as an operating system. When you are denied something that someone else receives, and your immediate response is to examine the difference between yourself and them, rejection has revealed that your self-assessment is being run, at least in part, through the lens of relative standing. You are not simply asking, what am I in this situation? You are asking, what am I compared to them? And the answer to that question is almost never stable because it changes every time the comparison changes. This is a particularly painful mode of self-evaluation because it places your sense of adequacy entirely in the hands of other people's outcomes. If they succeed and you do not, you are behind. If they receive and you are denied, you are lacking. The comparison system keeps you in a permanent state of contingency, in which your value is always being recalculated based on external data points that have nothing to do with your actual alignment or your actual path. What does it reveal when rejection triggers comparison most intensely? It reveals that the self-concept is still being partially defined by social rank, that somewhere in the interior architecture there is a belief that worth is measured not in absolute terms, but in relative terms. This belief, once seen, becomes negotiable. It can be examined, it can be questioned, but it cannot be examined or questioned while it is running automatically beneath the surface of a shame response. The fear of replacement is another element that rejection surfaces. When a relationship ends, when a position is given to someone else, when a community forms without you, the fear of replacement whispers a particular narrative. There is someone better. There is someone who does more naturally what you could only do with effort. There is someone who fits more easily into the space you were trying to occupy, and that someone has rendered you obsolete. This fear is not about the specific person or opportunity. It is about a belief that your place in the world is precarious, that you are always in competition for a spot that could be taken from you by someone more qualified, that security does not come from within, but must be secured through constant performance and constant winning. Rejection activates this belief because it presents what feels like evidence that someone else has taken the spot. But the deeper truth, the one this archive holds, is that your spot cannot be taken by anyone because no one else carries your specific frequency, your specific history, your specific combination of qualities and experiences and directions. Someone may receive a position you applied for, but they are not living your life. They are not walking your path. They have not displaced you from your trajectory. They have simply received something that was calibrated for their trajectory. Your calibration is different, your door is different, and no one can occupy a door that was built for your specific frequency. What all of these revelations have in common is that they point toward a single underlying dynamic. The self is seeking from external events what can only be built internally. It is seeking confirmation of worth from gatekeepers. It is seeking proof of abundance from scarcity-structured beliefs. It is seeking stable self-assessment from an unstable comparison system. It is seeking security from outcomes rather than from within. And rejection, in its painful precision, reveals exactly where these seeking patterns are most active. The invitation this archive extends is not to eliminate desire. Desire is alive and real and necessary. The invitation is to examine the architecture behind the desire. To ask what the desire is carrying that belongs inside the self and has simply been placed outside it for safekeeping. Because the things you are looking for in the gate, the confirmation, the belonging, the proof, the security, these are not located behind any door. They are located inside the self that was looking for them. And a self that discovers this does not stop desiring. It simply stops needing the gate to answer a question the gate was never designed to answer. Not every closed door is a protective signal. This is perhaps the most important clarification in this entire codex, and it must be made with the same precision that every other section has required, because the teaching of rejection as redirection carries within it a significant risk, the risk that it becomes a rationalization for avoidance rather than a genuine practice of discernment. There is a version of this teaching that some people will take and use as permission to stop trying. They will receive one rejection, one closed gate, one difficult obstacle, and they will say, "This is a sign that this path is not for me." And they will withdraw. Not because the system is genuinely redirecting them, but because the fear of another rejection is more powerful than the desire for the thing being pursued. They will dress the fear in the language of alignment and call it wisdom. This archive calls this distortion spiritual bypassing through rejection theology. It is the use of a legitimate metaphysical framework to avoid the discomfort of legitimate effort. And it is important to be able to distinguish it from genuine navigational reading. The key distinction lies in this question: what is the source of the withdrawal? Is the withdrawal arising from a genuine inner signal, from a settled sense that this direction is not correct, from the arrival of new information that changes the alignment assessment? Or is the withdrawal arising from the anticipation of pain, from the desire to avoid the vulnerability of another attempt, from the exhaustion of repeated effort that has not yet been given enough time to compound? These two sources feel different in the body. The withdrawal that comes from genuine misalignment tends to carry a quality of relief beneath the disappointment. There is a sense of release, however uncomfortable, that accompanies the recognition that this door was not right. The withdrawal that comes from avoidance tends to carry a quality of contraction, a tightness, a sense of shrinking rather than releasing. The relief of avoidance is surface level and temporary. The relief of genuine redirection runs deeper and tends to grow rather than fade with time. Another important distinction is the difference between protective rejection and premature rejection. Protective rejection is rejection received after genuine, calibrated, aligned effort. It is the system saying that despite your legitimate preparation and sincere alignment, this specific door is closed because of factors outside your current capacity or because the path behind it would have cost you more than it gave. Premature rejection is rejection received after insufficient preparation, unclear communication, misaligned targeting, or effort that did not yet match the level of access being sought. Premature rejection is not the system saying this direction is wrong for you. It is the system saying you have not yet arrived at the threshold of readiness required for this specific door. There is a difference between a door that was never yours and a door that requires more development before you can hold it open. Discernment means knowing which kind of door you are standing in front of. The signs of premature rejection, as opposed to protective rejection, include a consistent pattern of rejection from a specific category of door due to a specific identifiable gap. Skill, experience, clarity of communication, quality of preparation. When rejection is consistently pointing to the same gap, it is not saying, turn away from this direction. It is saying, fill this specific gap and return. Protective rejection tends to have a different signature. It tends to occur when the preparation was genuine and adequate, when the alignment was sincere, and when something beyond your preparation or effort determined the outcome. It also tends to occur at a threshold where the person was intuitively uncertain, where something in them already knew, before the rejection arrived, that the fit was not quite right. There is also the distortion of magical thinking in the reading of rejection. This occurs when someone uses the concept of protected redirection to avoid examining their own responsibility in an outcome. The rejection was not protective. It was informational. It was telling you something specific about the quality, clarity, or alignment of what you brought to the threshold. But the magical thinking version of the teaching says, if it was supposed to be mine, it would have opened. Therefore, if it did not open, it was not supposed to be mine. Therefore, I have no responsibility to examine what I could have done differently. This is a closed loop that removes all feedback from the equation. And feedback is what makes the system valuable. If every rejection is automatically coded as protection, the system loses its capacity to teach, because you stop listening to what the rejection is specifically saying about the gap between your current state and the requirements of the door. The discernment practice required here is one of active inquiry rather than automatic coding. Each rejection requires its own reading, and the reading must be honest enough to consider the possibility that this rejection was not protection, but information. That the door was calibrated correctly and the key was the thing that needed work, not your fundamental worth, but the specific preparation, presentation, or alignment that the key represents. There is also a distortion that comes from cumulative discouragement rather than genuine signal. A person who has been rejected many times across a long period may begin to read all rejection as confirmation of a pattern rather than as individual navigational data points. The pattern itself becomes the lens, and the lens distorts. What might be a single informational rejection pointing to a specific and correctable gap is read as more evidence of the fundamental pattern that says, you are not the kind of person who receives these things. This distortion is particularly insidious because it feels like pattern recognition. It feels like wisdom. It feels like the person has learned something from their experience, but it is actually a form of confirmation bias in which each new rejection is used to reinforce an existing conclusion rather than examined on its own terms. The antidote is not to ignore the pattern, but to examine each rejection in isolation before allowing it to contribute to the larger narrative. Finally, there is the distortion of exit without discernment. This is when a person, having learned the language of rejection as redirection, begins to exit every difficult situation prematurely, reading every obstacle as a closed door and every challenge as a sign that the path is wrong. The teaching of protected rejection requires patience. It requires the willingness to sit with difficulty long enough to determine whether the difficulty is a gate or a test, a lock or a threshold that requires persistence. Not every storm means you are going the wrong direction. Sometimes the storm is on the path. Sometimes the difficulty is the texture of the legitimate work. Sometimes the discomfort of the pursuit is not the system saying stop, but the system saying this is where the actual learning occurs. Stay. The practice this archive offers for navigating rejection is called the Locked Gate Protocol. It is a sequence of 7 movements, not steps in the mechanical sense, but movements in the inner life. Each movement requires something different from you. Each movement builds on the last, and together they transform the experience of rejection from a wound into a reading. The first movement is called the pause. The moment you receive a rejection, before you interpret it, before you respond to it, before you tell anyone about it, pause. This pause is not passivity. It is a deliberate act of interrupting the automatic sequence that the subconscious always runs in response to closed access, because the automatic sequence moves from signal to shame in approximately the time it takes to breathe out. The pause inserts a gap between those two events. The pause does not need to be long. It does not require hours of meditation or formal practice. It is simply the act of acknowledging that something has occurred before deciding what it means. It is the moment of saying, something just happened. Not yet. Something just told me who I am. Only, something just happened. And within that sentence, the possibility of accurate reading becomes available. During the pause, one practice is particularly useful. It is the practice of locating the sensation in the body before locating the meaning in the mind. Where does the rejection land physically? In the chest, the throat, the stomach. Not as a clinical observation, but as a genuine inquiry, because the body receives the signal before the mind interprets it, and the quality of the sensation, its texture, its weight, its location, is itself information about how deeply this door was fused to your identity and what specifically it was supposed to confirm. The second movement is called the depersonalization. This does not mean disconnecting from the experience emotionally. It means separating the event from the verdict. It means consciously, deliberately refusing the interpretation that says this rejection is a statement about who you are. It is a statement about alignment. It is a statement about timing. It is a statement about fit, about resonance, about the intersection of your current state and the requirements of this particular door. It is not a statement about your worth. The depersonalization movement requires a kind of inner restatement, something like, the door did not open. That is the event. The event is not the verdict. The event is a signal. I am the reader of the signal. I am not the object the signal is describing. This restatement sounds simple. It may feel impossible in the first hours after a rejection. Practice it anyway, not because it will immediately feel true, but because repetition of a more accurate interpretation is how the subconscious begins to revise its automatic coding. The third movement is called naming the door. This requires you to be very specific about what you were actually pursuing, not the abstracted desire that the door represented, but the concrete thing. Not love, but this specific relationship dynamic. Not success, but this specific measure of professional confirmation. Not opportunity, but this specific version of the life you were trying to construct. The naming is important because abstracted desires cannot be examined. Only specific ones can be examined. When you name the door precisely, you can begin to ask specific questions about it. Was this the right relationship dynamic for who you are actually becoming? Was this specific measure of professional confirmation the most accurate measure of the direction you are actually moving in? Was this specific version of the life you were constructing still aligned with the person you are actually developing into? These questions are only accessible when the desire is named specifically. Abstractions provide no purchase for genuine examination. The fourth movement is called the cost examination. This is the movement most people skip. It requires you to examine honestly, not what the thing behind the door would have given you, but what it would have cost you. Because every door has a cost. Not every cost is too high, but every cost is real. And rejection gives you a rare opportunity to examine the cost without having to pay it. The cost examination asks, if I had been given access to this, what would I have given up? In the relationship, what would I have accommodated, suppressed, or released in order to maintain connection? In the position, what would I have required of my time, my creative energy, my sense of direction? In the opportunity, what would I have been building toward, and does that still align with where I actually want to arrive? These are not rhetorical questions designed to make you feel better about the rejection. They are genuine inquiries. And sometimes, the honest examination reveals that the cost would have been acceptable or even worthwhile. Sometimes it reveals that you were genuinely aligned with the door and the rejection was a timing issue. Both are valid findings. The point is not to arrive at a predetermined conclusion. The point is to examine what you were actually signing up for. The fifth movement is called the protection inquiry. This movement asks, what might I have been protected from? Not as a way of manufacturing gratitude that you do not actually feel, but as a way of genuinely opening the question. Because the system that produces closed access is intelligent, and it considers factors you cannot always see from your current position. The protection inquiry is most useful when done at a slight temporal distance from the rejection. In the immediate aftermath, the pain is too present to allow genuine inquiry. But several days or weeks later, when the acute sensation has settled, the question becomes answerable in a different way. What was behind that gate? What do I now know about the person, the environment, the culture, the structure that I did not know when I was pressing against the lock? And is there anything in that knowledge that suggests the system might have been protecting me from something I could not see? Sometimes the protection inquiry yields nothing immediately useful. The information is not yet available. The consequences of the alternative path have not yet become visible. And in those cases, the movement is simply to hold the question open, to allow the possibility that protection was at work without needing to confirm it yet. The question itself changes the relationship to the event. It moves the event from a closed verdict into an open inquiry. The sixth movement is called watching for the opening. This is perhaps the most difficult movement, not because it requires intense effort, but because it requires a particular quality of relaxed attention that is almost impossible to sustain when the subconscious is still generating the contracted focus of loss. Watching for the opening means re-expanding the perceptual field after it has been narrowed by the rejection. It means deliberately returning your attention to the peripheral range of your awareness. The opening that appears after a closed gate almost never announces itself dramatically. It does not arrive wearing the same shape as the door that closed. It arrives in a different form, in a different area of life, sometimes in a different domain entirely. A conversation that would otherwise have seemed unremarkable. An invitation that would otherwise have been declined as too unfamiliar. An interest that had been suppressed resurfaces with new urgency. A direction that had been backgrounded moves into the foreground. The opening is often quiet, and it requires a quiet enough inner state to be noticed. The seventh movement is called moving without bitterness. This is the movement that completes the protocol and determines what you carry forward from the experience. because you can complete all of the preceding movements and still exit the experience with a residue of bitterness, a protective hardening that says, I will not want this much again, or I will not be vulnerable to this kind of gate again, or the system cannot be trusted. And that hardening, however understandable, is the one thing that will most reliably corrupt the calibration of your future encounters with doorways. Moving without bitterness does not mean moving without memory. You carry the information of the closed gate. You carry the data of what was and was not aligned. You carry the knowledge of what the cost examination revealed and what the protection inquiry suggested. But you do not carry the wound as armor. You do not let the locked gate of yesterday determine the frequency with which you approach the doors of tomorrow. The bitterness, when it is present, requires its own process. It requires the honest acknowledgement that something was wanted and not received, and that this was genuinely difficult. It requires the movement through grief rather than the bypassing of it, because grief is not the enemy of forward movement. Unprocessed grief that is calcified into bitterness is the enemy of forward movement. The grief, allowed to move through, eventually clears. And what remains after it clears is the information of the experience, separated from the weight of the wound. The locked gate protocol is not a formula that produces results on a fixed timeline. It is a practice. It requires repetition. It requires you to run the sequence not once, but again and again across every closed gate you encounter, until the movements become an instinctual response to closure rather than a deliberate exercise. And eventually, after enough practice, the gap between rejection and interpretation becomes wide enough that shame cannot fill it automatically, wide enough that the reading can begin before the verdict is installed, wide enough that you can look at a closed gate and genuinely, not performatively, wonder what it is telling you. One additional practice supports the entire protocol. It is the practice of archiving your rejections, not obsessively, not as a catalog of wounds, but as a record. A simple, honest record that notes the door, the date, the immediate reading, and then, months later, the retrospective reading. Because one of the most powerful corrections to the misreading of rejection is the accumulation of evidence that the retrospective reading is almost always significantly different from the immediate reading. That what seemed like defeat in the moment is often, with time, revealed as something more interesting. The archive of your own navigational history becomes the most compelling argument for trusting the system over the emergency of the moment. The most common mistake people make after receiving a rejection is returning to the same door with only slightly different packaging. They change the approach, the wording, the timing, the presentation, the energy with which they attempt the lock. But the fundamental proposition remains the same. The door remains the same, and the assumption remains the same, that if they can just find the right combination of inputs, the gate will yield. This mistake is so common because it feels indistinguishable from legitimate persistence. From the outside, and even from the inside, returning to the same door with a refined approach looks like learning from feedback. And sometimes it is. But the distinction is important. Legitimate persistence returns to a door with genuinely new information that addresses a genuine and identifiable gap. The mistake returns to a door with a cosmetic adjustment and the same fundamental misalignment intact. The adjustment addresses the surface. The misalignment remains in the foundation. How do you know which one you are doing? Ask yourself this: am I changing something in response to a specific signal the rejection provided about what was missing? Or am I changing something in the hope that any change will produce a different result? If it is the first, you may be engaged in legitimate refinement. If it is the second, you are pressing the same key into the same lock from a different angle. The lock does not respond to angle, it responds to fit. The second major mistake is what this archive calls performing worth for the gatekeeper. This occurs when a person, having been rejected, begins to orient their entire energy toward demonstrating their value to the specific person or system that denied them. They produce work they believe the gatekeeper will respond to. They develop qualities they think the gatekeeper will recognize. They position themselves in the gatekeeper's field of attention with increasing frequency and visibility, hoping to provoke a reversal of the initial judgment. The fundamental error in this pattern is the belief that the gatekeeper's judgment is the measurement system by which your worth is determined. It is not. The gatekeeper was calibrated for a specific function. That function may or may not have been the right function for you. And performing worth for a calibration that was not built for your frequency will require you to move further and further from your actual frequency in order to match the gatekeeper's requirements. This is the opposite of alignment. It is the performance of an identity you do not have in order to gain access to something that, even if the performance succeeded, would require you to maintain that performance indefinitely. The third mistake is spiritualizing passivity. This is when the teaching of rejection as redirection becomes a justification for doing nothing. The person receives a rejection, frames it as a closed gate, and interprets the protection function of the law as a signal that they should not pursue anything further in that direction. They stop applying, stop reaching out, stop creating, stop putting themselves in front of new opportunities. They are waiting for the universe to open a door without their participation. This is a misreading of how the system operates. The system does not deliver aligned opportunities to stationary people. It delivers them through motion. The redirection that follows a closed gate almost always requires you to move in a new direction, not to stand still in front of the old one. The pause that follows rejection is a pause in the pursuit of the specific closed door. It is not a pause in all forward motion. The practice of watching for the opening, the sixth movement of the protocol, requires you to be in motion in order to encounter the opening when it appears. The fourth mistake is becoming cynical. Cynicism is bitterness systematized. It is the conclusion drawn from a series of painful rejections that the system is arbitrary, that effort does not produce alignment, that hope is a vulnerability, and desire is a trap. The cynic has taken the wound of rejection and used it to construct a worldview in which future risk is no longer possible. They have closed themselves in order to prevent further closing from occurring. The problem with cynicism is not that it is entirely wrong. It is that it is permanently incomplete. It takes a real pattern of pain and uses it to justify a protective withdrawal that eliminates the very movement that would produce the evidence against the cynical conclusion. The cynic cannot allow the evidence of aligned opening to accumulate because they have stopped moving toward any door. And the stopped movement is presented to themselves as wisdom. But it is not wisdom. It is armor. And armor, while protective, also prevents what is trying to reach you from reaching you. The fifth mistake is making the rejection mean more than the rejection. Every rejection is a specific signal about a specific event. It is not a statement about all events. It is not a revision of your entire trajectory. It is not a permanent alteration of your access to the life you are building. It is a closed door. One door. at this specific intersection of your current state and this specific door's requirements. The mistake is to generalize the specific signal into a universal law about your life. When you generalize the rejection, you turn one navigational data point into a governing belief. And governing beliefs do not stay in the background. They come forward and begin to shape your behavior, your posture, your willingness to try, your capacity to desire without armoring. The rejection must be kept at the level of the specific event, examined there, read there, processed there, and not allowed to become the foundational statement about the entire system. The sixth mistake is seeking external validation to counteract the rejection. This is the pattern of immediately reaching out to people who will reassure you of your worth in the aftermath of a closed gate. The calls, the conversations, the social performances of not being affected, the seeking of praise or confirmation from other sources to fill the gap left by the gatekeeper's refusal. This is understandable, but it is a substitution, not a healing. The discomfort of rejection, if immediately soothed by external validation, never reaches the level of honest self-examination where the actual work is available. The seventh mistake is reversing the teaching under pressure. This is when a person learns the language of rejection as redirection, uses it effectively for a period, and then abandons it the moment a rejection arrives that feels too significant to read as navigation. The relationship that was most important, the opportunity that felt most aligned, the door they had built most of their hope around. When one of these closes, the teaching suddenly feels inadequate, and the old framework of shame and verdict and emergency reasserts itself with full force. The robustness of the teaching is measured precisely by its capacity to hold in the most difficult cases. A framework for reading rejection that only works for small rejections is not a framework. It is a comfort available only in comfortable circumstances. The protocol must be practiced precisely in the cases where it is most difficult to apply. Not because the pain of those cases does not matter, but because those are the cases where the accuracy of the reading is most consequential, where the mistake of personalizing the signal will cause the most damage to the forward movement, where the capacity to pause, to depersonalize, to examine honestly is the most protective thing you have. When the locked gate protocol is understood as a practice rather than a technique, it begins to apply itself to domains of life that extend far beyond the specific rejections that introduced you to it. The teaching, properly integrated, becomes a lens through which you read the entire field of your life, and the field is full of signals that most people are not equipped to receive. In the domain of career and vocation, the closed gate protocol reveals something that takes many people years to understand. The positions, industries, and professional identities that resist your entry are not always resisting your competence. They are sometimes resisting your nature. There is a version of you that could, with sufficient effort, force entry into almost any professional category. The question is not whether you could get there. The question is whether the getting there would bring you into greater alignment with who you actually are, or whether it would require a sustained performance of a self that does not belong in that environment. Career rejection, when read through the protocol, asks, does this environment actually want what I am? Not what I can simulate being, but what I genuinely am in my working nature, my creative rhythm, my values, my mode of contribution? When the answer is no, the rejection is not an obstacle to a career. It is a redirection toward the environment that does want what you genuinely are. And the environment that wants what you genuinely are will not only accept you, it will activate something in you that the wrong environment was suppressing. In the domain of romantic relationships, the protocol applied at depth reveals a pattern that almost no one wants to examine directly. The people who have rejected you most painfully were often, though not always, rejecting a version of you that you were performing rather than inhabiting, a version calibrated to what you thought they wanted, a version assembled from your reading of their preferences rather than your own nature. And the rejection, in those cases, was not a rejection of you, it was a rejection of the performance. And what the performance was covering was the self that was actually available for connection. The advanced application in romantic contexts involves asking a question that requires genuine courage. In the relationships where I was pursuing hardest, how much of what I was presenting was actually me, and how much was a construction designed to be what I thought they wanted? Because the self that was most suppressed during the pursuit is almost always the self that the right relationship would have wanted most. The forced performance is what gets rejected. The authentic self is what gets met. In the domain of money and financial access, rejected loan applications, declined investments, failed launches, and passed over pitches often carry a specific category of signal. The signal is about infrastructure. The money was seeking a structure to flow into that was not yet ready to hold it. Not in the sense that you are incapable, but in the sense that the foundational systems, the clarity of the plan, the scalability of the model, the stability of the operation, were not yet at the level that the size of the money would require. Financial rejection, read through the protocol, is an infrastructure diagnostic. It is asking, what does the thing I am building need to be strengthened before it is ready to receive what I am seeking? And this is a radically different question from the one that shame produces, which is, why am I not capable enough to be trusted with this? The first question is constructive. It identifies a specific area of development. The second question is destructive. It indicts the self without providing any useful direction. In the domain of friendship and community, rejection and exclusion tend to activate the deepest layers of the survival script, because community belongs to the most ancient category of safety. To be excluded from a group, particularly a group that represents your values or your desired identity, is experienced by the nervous system as one of the most threatening of all rejection events. And yet, community rejection is often one of the most precise navigation signals available. The community or group that does not include you may not be the community that was built for your frequency. The creative community that did not embrace your work may not have been built to understand the specific mode in which your creativity operates. The professional community that does not acknowledge your contribution may be organized around a hierarchy that your contribution does not fit. The social group that does not draw you in may be held together by a dynamic that would have required you to diminish yourself to participate. The exclusion, though painful, may have been the system preserving your frequency rather than forcing it into compression. In the domain of creative work and audience growth, the locked gate protocol reveals something about the relationship between rejection and specificity. Creative work that is rejected broadly, that fails to find resonance across many different channels and contexts, is not always work that lacks quality. It is sometimes work that carries too precise a frequency to be received by a general audience. It is work that is waiting for its specific audience, the people who are tuned exactly to the transmission it is sending. The creative rejection, in this context, is a calibration instrument. It is helping the creator identify who the work was not built for, which is a more efficient process than it appears. Each rejection narrows the field. Each non-response eliminates a direction, and the accumulation of eliminated directions eventually leaves a more precise target visible. The work that was broadly rejected and then found its specific audience is often the work that goes deepest into the people it finally reaches, because it was never trying to be received by everyone. It was trying to reach someone specific, and the rejections were the process of clearing the field until that specific resonance was visible. In the domain of spiritual direction and inner life, rejection operates in a particularly profound way. The spiritual practice that did not take hold, the teacher who did not resonate, the community of belief that did not feel like home, the framework that offered a temporary shelter but not a permanent dwelling, all of these are forms of spiritual rejection. And they are perhaps the most important rejections to read carefully. Because spiritual direction is not about finding the most popular path, or the most accessible framework, or the teacher with the largest audience. It is about finding the specific transmission that is calibrated to your actual interior architecture, not the one that sounds most true in general, the one that opens something in you that was closed before you encountered it. The closed gates in spiritual life are directing you away from frameworks that would have organized your inner life according to someone else's structure rather than your own nature. And the door you have not yet found in that domain is still ahead. The search itself is not a failure. It is a calibration in progress. The most advanced application of the locked gate protocol is this: to use the entire pattern of rejection across all domains of your life as a navigation instrument for the long arc. Not any individual rejection, but the accumulated pattern. Where have the gates closed most consistently? What do those closures have in common? What directions do they collectively eliminate? And when you map the eliminated directions, what remains? What does the field look like when you remove everything that has been systematically denied access? What remains, after honest examination, is often closer to the actual direction of your life than any specific thing you were pursuing. The pattern of closures is a negative space, and inside the negative space, the actual shape of what was always possible for you becomes visible. The gates closed in order to define that shape. Every locked gate was a brushstroke, and you are only now, from this distance, beginning to see the image they were painting. Come back to the gate in the rain. You are there again, standing in front of it, key in hand. But something is different this time. You are not pressing the key forward. You are holding it at your side, looking at the gate with new eyes. The rain is still falling. The gate is still locked. But you are reading it now, not fighting it. You see the symbols carved into the iron that you did not see before, the patterns that were always there, the texture of a lock that was never designed to yield to this key. And you notice that your hand is no longer aching because you have stopped turning the key against the wrong resistance. You have stopped asking the gate to confirm that you belong to what is behind it. You have simply stopped, and in the stopping, something behind you becomes visible. There is a path. It was there the entire time you were pressing against the gate. It runs in a direction you did not look because the gate filled your entire field of vision. You can see it now because you turned, not in defeat, in discernment. The turning is not the same as giving up. The turning is the moment the protocol completes, the moment the reading finally happens, the moment you stop forcing entry and start following the signal. The path behind you does not announce itself as better than the gate. It is simply lit, quietly, in the way that correct directions tend to be lit in this archive. Not dramatic, not decorated with confirmation and applause, but visible in a way that the gate, for all its presence and solidity, never was. The gate was there. The path was there. You simply could not see the path while all of your attention was pressed against the iron. This is what rejection has always been trying to give you, not the comfort of a closed door, not the assurance that everything is fine, but the gift of a turned attention, the recalibration of a perceptual field that had narrowed to a single locked point, the moment where the weight of the pursuit finally releases and the peripheral vision returns. And in the returning of that vision, what was always available becomes visible, not because it appeared suddenly, but because you are finally facing it. The locked gate in the rain is not your story of failure. It is your story of navigation. Every closed door you have ever stood in front of belongs to the same story. The application that was denied, the message that was never answered, the relationship that did not choose you, the opportunity that went to someone else, the collaboration that dissolved before it began, the loan that was declined, the creative work that was passed over. Every one of those gates was part of a system that was working, not against you, but in the direction of where you were actually supposed to go. And the rain that fell on you at each of those gates was not punishment. It was the atmosphere of a threshold. Every threshold has its weather. If this codex found you at the right time, keep it close. Return to it when the signs become difficult to read, when a gate closes that feels too significant to be navigated, when the pain of a new rejection makes the language of protection feel distant or impossible. The protocol is here. The language of closed access is here. The third library holds it for you between visits, and if what is held here continues to serve your navigation, subscribe. There are more chambers in this library than this one, and more codices whose seals are waiting to be opened. You are not the person who was rejected at the gate. You are the person who learned to read the gate. You are the person who turned. And the path that became visible when you turned is the one this entire archive was written to help you walk.